Welcome back to the Splash Life. This is Diane Shaban alongside Tyler Kieft. We have a therapist today joining us, therapist Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
So Carrie, as I don't know if you've been following, but I know that everybody's been following the Crumbly case, and we've heard some recent allegations stating that the teenager had been suffering for a very long time, and his pleas for mental health has been ignored by his parents and by his educators. So, what we would like to talk about today, Carrie, is the importance of mental health and the importance of watching out for these signs. Like we cannot help but think for ourselves, what if these signs were not ignored and he actually seeks mental health? Would that have stopped him? So, what are signs that educators or even parents should look out for?
I think adolescence and teenage years are a really hard time for both parents and educators because there's sort of multiple factors facing young people. On one side, some teens' behaviors may be concerning to parents and maybe just simple teenage issues. Whereas other behaviors are a sign of mental health, and so some parents may overreact to minor changes in their kids' mood or behavior, whereas other parents underreact to significant changes in their kids' mood and behavior. And it's hard to distinguish what is normal teenage and what is a problem. So certainly, parents, I always say, if you kind of know the who, what, where, when, and why of your children's lives, and that really should start through their early years and as they approach adulthood. But who are they talking to? What are they talking about? What are they doing with these people? When are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Really familiarizing yourself with your kids' inner and outer world will help you to know the difference between what is a legitimate concern and what is perhaps normal teenage mood or behavior.
Understanding. So what you're trying to say is they should try to communicate with them before even that happens. Try to get into them. Try to tell them that it's okay if you talk to us about your challenges. So, therapist Carrie, how can these parents, like, what are advices you give to these parents to communicate better with their children, to prep them or to make them feel more comfortable talking to them about whatever challenges they're trying to face in school or mentally or psychologically?
Sure. I mean, I think first and foremost, for a parent to stay compassionate and curious. Of course, our kids may tell us something that is concerning to us, but if we become emotionally dysregulated with anxiety or anger, we will easily shut our children, our teen children down. If we also are confused or act in just disbelief that we can't believe that this is a concern, they will also believe we're out of touch. And so to try to modify our own mood and emotions, even if we're concerned, and maintain compassion and curiosity, ask questions. Certainly, especially because we're trying to create emerging adults, have your children offer their own suggestions before you interject your own problem solving advice. How have they considered solving the problem? What tools or strategies have they tried to apply to their problems? And then ask, may I offer some of my own ideas about what you can do next, as opposed to just jumping in and solving the problem. Certainly, if their behaviors, perhaps hanging out with delinquent peers or getting involved sexually too early, or any kind of aggression or bullying, or maybe even substance use, parents may have to apply consequences or set limits or change family rules or expectations. I think one thing parents could do that they don't often do is take time to acknowledge, say, something that's going on here is problematic, and we as parents have to apply a consequence or change some way our household is run, but not to necessarily sweep in fast and furious with a consequence right away, but that we are going to take time to think about it, to consult with other adults, to consult with other parents about how to respond. But just trust us, there will be a response.
Understanding. That's a great advice, Dr. K. Thank you so much. In your line of work, what do you think are some of the, or what do you see are some of the challenges for these teenagers seeking help or asking their parents to seek mental help professionally?
Sure. So I think there are sort of two sides of things. Some kids are very stressed about their changes in adolescence and adulthood. They're plagued by social pressures, and they're kind of in this in-between state. They want more and more independence. Perhaps their parents aren't giving them, but are also overwhelmed by the things they're experiencing. And whereas other kids are stressed, yeah, by new requirements and sort of like new expectations as far as school and grades and perhaps their future, feeling a lot of pressure about choosing college or getting into the right place. So it feels like everything feels kind of like a high intensity competition, whether socially or academically, and then that can create a lot of pressure for kids. Some become sort of crushed under that pressure and feel sort of hopeless, insecure, depressed, whereas others feel panicked under that pressure and feel on edge, overwhelmed, anxious, high strung, difficulty sleeping. And so we're seeing both sides of those things. And academic success isn't everything, but children who do better in school, as far as getting A's and B's or as an indicator, are also less likely to get involved with delinquent peers, are less likely to have substance abuse or substance abusing friends, less likely to become sexually active at early ages. So grades are an indicator of a healthy student and a healthy young person. They're not everything, and the pressure that kids feel, like I said, to compete both academically and socially is a real burden.
Understandable. Apart from academically, like even at, I know with the Crumbly case, it's a little bit different. He was trying to suffer. I don't know if you've read the notes, but he was suffering from something darker than this. So he mentioned in one of his journals that he was going through something dark, and he couldn't help but submit to the darkness. So and that's very sad. And one of the psychologists in the trial testified that it's a part of a neglected childhood. Now, based on the trial or based on these testimonials, what do you think? How do you think the early intervention could have helped? Like, I know we're just assuming, but how early intervention? How does it help, and how might have it helped Crumbly?
Sure. I want to say that I am not more familiar with this case than the general public. So what I see is really just what we see on the news and media. And I can't really weigh in on any specific diagnosis or anything specifically related to him, but certainly positive parent involvement is a factor in raising a successful child. And what that means is activities together, social time together. I mean, it doesn't have to be so big as a vacation, but time spent together as a family, enjoying activities, shared activities together. Again, like I said, parental monitoring and supervision means, like I said, that awareness of who, what, where, when, and why of your kid's life, both inside and externally. Are there peers? Are there what are the sort of the content of conversation? What are people talking about? I think um, parents can have a challenge too, because some kids may seem calm, cool, and collected on the surface, and even despite stresses, and that may be a relief to some parents. But a child who is calm in the face of perhaps some stressful things, which high school and middle school are stressful for young people, it may actually be a sign that things are actually not well, that they're missing social cues, that they're not engaging appropriately socially. So you would expect some variation in a teen child's moods and emotions and reactivity. And if they're too plain, they're sort of under responsive. That may also be a source of concern that parents miss. Um, and parents are probably more likely to intervene when a child is being very obviously on edge or stressed out or tearful or very reactive or preoccupied with peer issues. And so a parent may be unfortunately comforted by someone who seems on the surface okay, but those child also still need their parents' support, even if they seem to be managing okay.
So, Carrie, you mentioned something about the educators realizing those early warning signs, whether it's academically or how or based on their performance. What advice do you give to educators as a therapist? What advice do you give for educators just to watch out for these warning signs? And do you believe like educators do have a role in trying to communicate with the parents, tell them that there's something wrong, and trying to work together to find solutions for that struggling child?
Sure, educators are under a lot of demand. So I think actually perhaps the responsibility is on parents to maintain an open relationship with their children's school, whether that means volunteering for activities, participating in PTO, maintaining relationships or developing groups like, book clubs or something with other parents. Parents should be sort of finding ways to maintain that communication with the school. Again, that kind of fits again with positive parent involvement and monitoring and supervision. I mean, of course, then educators welcoming that from parents would of course be something that would be a helpful thing educators could do. Certainly educators would have some idea of maybe things that are going on in the school day outside of a parent's awareness, who's hanging out with who, or have friends or peer groups change. But I think an educator, it would be very complicated for them to address every parent every time those shifts happen, especially in adolescent years. But I think that if a parent develops a behavior of including the school as part of one of their touch points, and the school was open, that would certainly be an avenue to address things and give parents more information and more data about their own kid.
That's so true. We want to again give props to our educators for working so hard throughout the summer and during the
Mhm.
school year to provide the best education possible for their children. And I do agree with you. Parents should watch out for these warning signs and try to just lay off the work a little bit and try to be with your children. Teenagerity is a very hard phase to go through, and it's even harder to tell if there are warning signs or not because teenagers go through stuff. It's hormonal stuff and changes, so we cannot really tell what's really going on. Now,
Mhm.
for teenagers or for adolescents who cannot access or do not have access to a mental health care provider or a mental therapist, what resources do they have? What advices do you want to give them to the adolescents if you're talking to them directly?
Sure. I mean, certainly, if you can advocate for yourself, if you think there's a need and you tell your parents or some other close caregiver or other adult, if you strike out with your parents, perhaps try another adult to see if you can enlist an adult to help advocate and support for you. Now, adolescents are able to engage in treatment for a small number of sessions, perhaps before their parents' consent. But of course, you need if you needed payment or insurance or things like that. I mean, I think parents, if you have questions, if your child is asking and you're not sure if it's rises to the level of needing it, go to your own pediatrician or doctor. And doctors now are asking these questions, which is great. So well visits are coming up. And so if an adolescent has an appointment with a doctor and you're not sure it's the right doctor, at least that doctor has information to guide you to the right place, or perhaps communicate with your parents about what they're seeing. I think of like even just early childhood stuff, and we've talked about this during COVID and other things, like go to the helpers. Like if a teen child knows, okay, maybe I can't exactly talk to my parents, use an educator, a coach, a religious leader. Like there are helpers in your community, and someone will be able to at least advocate for you and help you develop the ways you need to communicate to your own parents, to access the help that you need.
Carrie, thank you so much for these valuable, valuable advices, whether it's for the parents or educators. I know that these are for some people it is common knowledge to go and seek help, but for other people it may not be that common because coming from I'm 30 and back in the day, like
Mhm.
when I was younger, it wasn't that common to go ahead and seek mental health because it's okay, you're going through struggles, we all go through struggles, so it wasn't okay. So it's such a valuable advice that you're giving to these parents and to these children and educators. Just to wrap this up, Carrie, what are your last advices on how important it is to seek mental health care for these younger generations, whether it's teenager or adolescent or just a younger generation in middle school?
Sure, absolutely. It can be both preventative and proactive. I mean, part of what the phase of adolescence is this bridge between childhood and adulthood. And I mean, ultimately, the goal is that we have communities filled with healthy, productive adults. And addressing these issues early and often, like I said, can help prevent worse problems like delinquency in school and poor peers, substance abuse, all things that would exacerbate mental health issues in adulthood can really be addressed and prevented with proper care through childhood and adolescence.
Therapist Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for your valuable insights and advices and time. Thank you again for joining us.